Good evening, viewers, and welcome to Rendezvous Take One Expert Speak this Wednesday evening. Today, I have with me a person who has been into the space of leadership, and he is a leadership and a business coach with over 24 years of experience, and he has served clients across multiple countries, functions, and in diverse industries. He has led organizational development initiatives and leadership initiatives with clients in over 18 countries. He mentors industry leaders in enhancing productivity and managing their career transitions better. In fact, he has led talent management and succession planning initiatives in over 45 countries across the world. We have with us today a person who can answer your questions on career transitions and on executive presence. I have with me Bhaskar Bhattacharya here today. Hi, Bhaskar. Good evening.
Good evening, Nandita. How are you?
I'm doing good. How are you?
It's a pleasure to be here with you and share my perspectives. Thank you for having me here.
Pleasure is mine, Bhaskar. And I have a lot of questions which I've already poured in once I put your profile on Facebook and on LinkedIn. So, can we start straight with the questions?
Sure.
Okay.
Absolutely. Looking forward.
Okay. So, Bhaskar, the first question that I have with me, and it is very interesting, and it starts with the basics is what trends are you observing in executive coaching across industries today, especially during these tough COVID times?
Yeah. So, like I mentioned to you during my introduction, is I have been coaching across different industries and
Yes.
across different countries. If I talk specifically about India, the
Mm-hmm.
trends are very encouraging, Nandita. And year
Okay.
on year, I'm seeing more traction. There is more seriousness. Initially,
Okay.
what used to be more being done only in the multinational companies, I'm seeing
Mm-hmm.
a lot of shift happening to large Indian transformational organizations which work across different countries, and
Okay.
also in Indian organizations who specifically work in India, particularly at
Mm-hmm.
the senior levels. And now I'm seeing
Mm-hmm.
some trend happening also at the mid management as well. So it's very encouraging as different organizations are embracing coaching, they're realizing the power of coaching. People like us are in constant demand, and that's good news for all of us.
Yes, of course. So, Bhaskar, what goes into a leadership coaching or an executive coaching? If you could tell us some of the components that you coach people on and why is it important in today's scenario, is something that I would like you to share with our viewers today.
So, one of the big ones that I'm seeing, particularly as a leadership coach, is leaders who are being selected for bigger roles, more complex
Okay.
roles. They are the
Mm-hmm.
ones who are the first ones who are being picked up for transitions. And
Okay.
what realizes the organizations realize that they have done a function for a very long time, and frankly
Okay.
don't have the exposure to the rest of the business. And
Mm-hmm.
definitely they require that maturity, that require that gravitas to handle much larger portfolio, influence a much larger team beyond their own team, sometimes even across geographies. And
Okay.
so career transition is one of the biggest ones. The other
Mm-hmm.
one which I'm noticing, of course, is enhancing performance and productivity. In today's
Okay.
time, in the pandemic, that is one of the critical ones. Every
Mm-hmm.
person needs to count, and every leader has to make sure that their organizations are more agile, nimble. So there is a lot of focus there in terms of enhancing productivity as well. So these two are the bigger ones. But
Hmm.
apart from that, there are also some of the requirements I see in terms of behavioral remedial coaching. So somebody
Okay.
who's technically brilliant does a
Hmm.
fantastic job on the functional side, but when it comes to influencing, when it comes to building a high performance team, they're really struggling. And so the
Okay.
organizations and the stakeholders are telling us, coaches, please help. Because in the
Okay.
next role, in the bigger role, or if they don't fix this particular remedial issue that they are struggling with,
Yeah.
they will not be able to go any further. In fact, that is going to be a derailer for them.
Okay, brilliant. Because that was my next question. How important it is, because somewhere organizations, and especially the traditional ones, and correct me if I'm wrong, they still believe, if you have technical competence, if you're good at what you're doing, if you can negotiate well, if you're able to save the organization X amount of money, you move up the ladder. So how important are those components that you're talking about in terms of gravitas, in terms of influencing, in terms of, productivity? Yes, I understand, which has been a core. But in
Yeah.
terms of the other behavioral aspects you're talking about, how important are they today? One, if a person wants to move up within the ladder, part two of the question is when they want to move across geographies. So there's two parts to this question.
Correct. And both are equally important. Let's look at the
Okay.
first one within the ladder.
Yeah.
Uh, the organizations are realizing what has got them to be so successful so far are
Okay.
the many reasons which is holding them back today, because
Okay.
they will have to deal with a very large number of people. They will
Mm.
have to influence without direct authority and power. And
Mm-hmm.
all of that requires for a lot of executive presence and gravitas, and
Hmm.
being able to really influence in the real sense of the term. And so even traditional organizations are realizing that what has got them so far very successful is perhaps becoming the reason why these guys are not successful as these organizations are expanding, as these people are being given bigger roles, more challenging roles. So
Okay.
that's definitely a realization. It's slow, but it is definitely catching up in the traditional organizations.
Beautiful.
The
So
story is a
how?
little different
Yeah,
when
sure.
it
Sorry,
comes
go
to
ahead.
the different geographies. There, the
Okay.
realization is very, very clear that look, the complexities are very, very different.
True.
The nuances are different, the dialects are different, cultural nuances are very, the people, how they react and for different issues, whether it's to do with creating harmony, handling conflicts, handling difficult conversations, issues with time management, dealing with stakeholders. Everything changes when you
Yeah.
change the cultures, when you change the geographies. And so
True.
there, definitely there is a large number of requirements that keep coming up for executive
Okay.
coaching and leadership coaching.
Okay. So if I go deeper into this word that you're using very often called gravitas, right? How would you, in your experience, define or come to a definition of what is gravitas?
So what's very interesting is, while I have a certain definition of gravitas,
Yeah.
which is
Yeah.
about what kind of signal the leader is really sending out in terms of, is he
Okay.
really ready
Yeah.
for the bigger role? Will he be
Uh-huh.
able to? Will he be really able to, work across multiple geographies, multiple teams, and get out of that technical mold and really put on the leadership hat? What is
Okay.
interesting, Nandita, I'm finding is organization after organization, when they unbox this
Uh-huh. Okay.
gravitas word, different
Uh-huh.
things come out. You know,
Okay.
in
Okay.
some cases, I'll give you a live example, couple of live examples. One of the big
Sure.
leader I'm dealing with right now, the
Hmm.
stakeholder, the CEO was very clear. This guy needs to work on gravitas. When I, dived a little deeper into the subject, what I found out is that this gentleman does not want to accept any feedback. So
Oh,
even a
okay.
360-degree feedback, when it is different from what this person's perception was, there is a
Mm-hmm.
lot of resistance, accepting
Okay.
that feedback and working on that feedback, right?
Mm-hmm.
So
Okay.
the big aspect of gravitas here is having that humility to accept, having the vulnerability to accept that, look, you are being observed in a certain manner. And if you really want to go to the next level and really
Hmm.
perform at the next bigger role, you really have to work on these areas, right?
Okay. Hmm.
That's one of the ways they are defining gravitas. The other interesting one which I came across is somebody who's very good when it
Hmm.
comes to working with peers and working with juniors, but every time the person is put across senior stakeholders,
Okay.
something happens and the person is just gets tongue tied, not able to express, not able to put their points across, even though they know the subject very well.
Mm-hmm.
So it's got to do with somewhere at a, and that's where as coaches we do a lot of inner work, working
Hmm.
on
I'm sure.
some of their self-limiting beliefs
Hmm.
and on their values, on their belief systems, to really help them look at themselves a little more clearly and developing that self-awareness so that they can manage themselves better when it comes to dealing with senior stakeholders. So there are multiple examples like this, and the reason I'm sharing these two is different organizations are defining it completely differently. Yeah,
Beautiful.
but overall, it's all about the signal that is being sent out by the leader. Is he really ready for the big role?
Beautiful. So, because I was reading, I am working in this space in terms of executive presence and doing a lot of research on the Indian market, because most of the researches today that I see is on the Western world, and we just, are trying to adapt to whatever best we can. And like you said, it is very true. It is about making your presence felt. It's how you handle stressful situations. How are you not holding on to your role as a leader and not giving in when there's a crisis? And how are you communicating crisis? And I think this is the most beautiful time where gravitas of true leaders is being seen thanks to COVID. How are they actually managing this crisis? And how are they not putting their teams under stress and pressure and not passing the buck to them and saying, putting a hands up kind of stuff? So yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. You put it beautifully. I'd like to put it as, does this person have grace under fire? Right?
Exactly. So that's
And
how it is. Yeah,
yeah,
very true.
yeah,
It is
it's
important. I
yeah,
think it's
absolutely.
very, very important.
Yeah. So I was coaching this managing director of a large multinational organization, and in this pandemic times, how they really dealt with the anxiety of their team members across so many geographies, how they put themselves out there in terms of regular communication, empathic communication. It was really amazing to see how the gravitas really played out in the real world with him, and
True.
how he was able to assuage the fears that was palpable about losing jobs, about pay cuts, and how he galvanized the team and kept his cool under pressure during this time. It was amazing to see that. Yeah.
I'm sure, because I think these are transformational situations which are. Bhaskar, we're talking about large corporates, which I understand, do understand the whole concept of gravitas, executive presence, personal branding. These are terms which are not alien to organizations which are multinational. And like you said, Indian organizations which have a global feel to it are also coming up. But
Yeah.
how important, and I personally do work with a lot of business owners who are, looking at scaling up pan India. And these are traditional business owners. I'm not saying they come from legacy in terms of, having uh, uh, a focus on training, development. But how important is it for business owners today to have that gravitas, to have executive presence when they want to go out and spread their wings beyond their states, beyond their cities today? Because you are also into this space, so I thought it would be a good question to ask you.
Yeah, absolutely. And I've been fortunate to work with some of the founders and co-founders of
Yeah.
young startups, and bubbling with energy. They have a ton of ideas which they want to go out and pitch to investors, and some of them want to be unicorns in a very short span of time. And
Exactly.
there, and there the whole element of executive presence, gravitas, putting your point across in a cogent manner, where the ideas can then be translated into real plans, and the plans can then be seen as having alignment with execution strategies. This whole
Okay.
piece in terms of uh, putting across their grand plans, which is there, and some of them are technically very savvy, but when it
Hmm.
comes to the communication bit, they need help. And that is where people like us, you and I, come in and help them look at that whole picture from the other perspective. What can you expect as
Yeah.
questions? How do you prepare yourself? How do you make sure that you are really making that impact in that short span of window that you have?
So, Bhaskar, we're talking communication, which we all know is a trainable skill, right? You can train people on communication easily. It's not easy, but yes, it is trainable. But things like, having a mindset like that, or even what you're talking about, belief change, you're talking about, grace under fire. Are these trainable, and how does coaching actually help is something I want you to bit more focus on. And what are some of the components that a person who is in an executive role needs to be aware of when he is talking about these terms?
Yeah, so I think the first we need to, as we unbox the whole thing about gravitas, and
Yeah.
when we do the training program, we help them understand. Look, it basically boils down to three big stuff, and
Mm-hmm.
the training program actually creates awareness on each of these areas. When it's whether we are talking about the character, how do you develop your character in terms of the credibility and the confidence that you exude, in
Hmm.
terms of your communication, in terms of your whether it's a written communication, verbal communication, on the online media, whatever is the medium.
Okay.
So that's the
Mm-hmm.
first point. How do you create awareness around that? Show them examples of how it can be done. Do also a self-awareness test with them to help them understand where
Okay.
are they today on this. The other
Mm-hmm.
piece, of course, is about you may be a very good communicator, but you need to have substance. What are you
Okay.
really talking about, right?
Mm.
So is
Okay.
what you're talking about, are you able to connect with the audience, irrespective
Mm-hmm.
of what kind of audience do you have, right? And it's also about being concise and succinct. People don't have
Okay.
very long attention spans these days.
Yeah.
How can
True.
you put your point across in a manner which will really be
Mm.
helpful? And the third one, of course, is the whole aspect of style. When you think of style, you think of people like Shashi Tharoor and the others. But
Yeah.
I'm not talking about using bombastic words here or hyperbolic
Okay.
terms. It's more
Ah.
about making sure that your
Ah.
style connects with the audience in a very good way. There's clarity
Mm.
in what you're trying to speak. When you speaking, your body language, the composure, etc., is measured. It's communicating, adding value to the communication, and of
Okay.
course, whole aspect of, I would say, a little bit of chutzpah and charisma, but based on
Okay.
authenticity. I mean, don't try to
Authenticity.
be something you're not. Yeah. So
So these
what
are
I my
trainable.
yeah, my experience has been, Nandita, is that in a training program, we can create the awareness and give them some practice. But if you
Mm-hmm.
want to do deeper work, if you
Yeah.
really want to see the needle move, the best way is to work with them one on one, because
I.
each person has different areas that they need to work deeper. And when we work as a coach with them month after month, week after
Yeah.
week, you can dive a lot deeper and really see the needle move. And I have been very fortunate working with multiple leaders across India and other countries, where the evidence has been so stark, so clear. Sometimes the stakeholders have come back and said, I don't know what you did, but there seems to be a new man here. Yeah, and that is primarily because of the one-on-one deeper connect that we can create during the coaching sessions, which sometimes is not really possible in the training, because after training of 4 to 5 hours, they go back and we don't know
Yeah.
what they have been able to do with that learning.
True. And all of them don't have the same pain points or the same reasons why they need to, what they need to change in themselves. And I think beyond a point, training is, like you said, awareness. And this does require a lot of deep dive into it. So even from my experience in the same industry, according to me, it takes anywhere between 3 to 6 months to see change in people. When we talk about words like gravitas, we talk words like executive presence. What has been your experience, Bhaskar? Because when I have people coming in at times, corporates come back, and especially the people who are in startups or founders, they said, uh, 2 months and make me into something different. So I was wondering, I don't have that magic wand, so I would like to hear your views on this,
Yeah,
Bhaskar.
this is a very interesting question, Nandita, and I'm glad you asked this question. Initially, when I started doing this work, the
Yeah.
thought process was, is it just about appearance? Is it just about grooming? I said, yes, that is definitely a very important component that you must
Yes.
work on. You must be
Yeah.
presentable when you are really talking about executive presence and gravitas. But that
Hmm.
alone is not the subject, right?
True.
So I think we have moved a long distance from
Yeah.
being seen as, and of course, you wrote a wonderful book on this, on dressology, which was, I think, path breaking. I think it really made people aware of what it takes. But as I said, as the
That is just
conversations
because.
move, as we ask more questions, dive deeper, what is happening, what is not happening, what would you like to see happen, then
Hmm.
all those things come about in terms of, this guy needs to have humility. He's too much. His ego is larger than to fix this, or he doesn't know how to handle difficult conversation. He just chickens out. He's running away
Yeah.
from conflicts. How can we give him a bigger role if he's running away from conflicts, right?
True.
And there's so many things that keep coming out when you start diving deeper into these conversations, and then you
True.
realize that, look, there are multiple aspects of this subject which we need to work
Yeah.
on, and each person has their own graph.
So again, like I said, for me, when I look at executive presence, I typically have three components which I call for myself. One is the appearance, which I think is the easiest for any of us to handle. because it's
Yeah.
just the tip of that iceberg. We say, okay, appearance has to be presentable, and what is presentable changes from person to person and from situation
Yeah.
to situation. The second part, which is more important, is the communication, how you handle crucial
Yes.
conversations, typical conversations, communicate the right message at the right time. The last and the most important, at the base of the iceberg, I call, is the gravitas, as you're calling it.
Mm.
That is the most important. And my experience says it takes that kind of time. So, according to you, is 1 month good enough to make a magic on people, or you think I still go back to that question? So,
I
approximately,
don't
what are
think,
the timelines that you would look at? Yeah.
in my experience, 1 month
Yeah.
would be. I'll need a magic wand or some magic pill.
Okay. Yeah.
I can create awareness. I can create some
For
exercises
behavior
for
change
to
to
work on.
happen, how much time do you
Yeah,
think it takes? Okay, let me put it that way.
it would take at least 4 to 6 months for
For the
tangible change to be visible.
Okay. And
That's been
sustainable
my
change is what we are
and
talking about, right? It's not that the moment you move out, the change, you just
yeah,
sit back.
then it's not good enough. Yeah,
Yeah.
because if we are
Okay.
really doing the inner work, it takes some time for people to accept. They have
Very
been
true.
hardwired, they have been conditioned for a very long time. It cannot
True.
just disappear just like that. Yeah.
True. Very true. So, Bhaskar, some of the challenges that you see or you faced when you actually go back to people and talk about they need to change, or they need to, improve, or they need to have maybe at times a 360 turnaround. So, what are some of the challenges that you faced, and we'd like to share that with us?
So one of the big ones, of course, is if a person has been successful doing something for a very long time, they become resistant to anything else. They think this is the way to do it. And
Again.
just because my stakeholders are telling me
Okay.
to change, why should I change? Right? I have been very successful
Thank
doing
you.
what I have been doing. So they push back.
Yeah.
And so one of the biggest challenges is in the initial phases is to use different tools and psychometric instruments to actually make them realize that what's got you here will actually keep you back. That there will be a lot of detailers for you if you don't
Yeah.
work on this. An organization is thinking of you on a bigger perspective, larger roles. You need
Mhm.
to move the needle. You need to change. And the big one that I face is that, particularly in traditional organizations, Indian
Yeah.
organizations, is because there hasn't been enough feedback given to them also over the years, is they have
Yeah.
understood that that is the best way to do things. So breaking that initial ice, making them realize that I need to change, I need to really walk this path, and it will require some effort and diligent work, is the first big challenge that one has to sometimes overcome. If it has been
Okay.
positioned very well by the organization, by the stakeholders, why you need to change, what are we really thinking about you, then the task becomes a little more easier.
But just going back again, a question. Now, you're talking about multinationals which have a career path, they have their succession planning in place, most of them, right? And ideally, a
Yeah.
good company which is more into organizational development would do something like that. But coming back to traditional organizations or even startups where the career path is not very well defined, and like you said, they don't know what will happen when the change happens, though they know something is going to happen, but it's not very tangible in front of them. So,
Yes.
what would be your advice to people? And I'm asking you from an advice perspective, from being a coach. Why should such people change? And what would be your advice to people who are coming from very traditional organizations who've been happy in their roles, and also from another perspective of people who are in startups where I don't know I know that something has to be done, but I don't know what has to be done, kind of thing.
Right, right. With startups, it's a little more easier because they are very ambitious. They want to
Okay.
grow. They want
Okay.
to really take on the big bad world, and they want to prepare themselves for whatever it takes. So there,
Hmm.
I have found my experience with the founders and co-founders has been, it's been fairly easy. It's
Beautiful.
been, once you bring that the end state very clearly in front of them. This is what
Hmm.
it can do for you. This is what
Okay.
new doors it can open for you.
Okay.
The acceptability is a lot higher. In the
Hmm.
traditional organizations, one has to work a little harder with the stakeholders to make sure that the right feedback is being given.
Okay.
And some of those conversations are not very comfortable conversations initially. There is a lot of pushback, and but I should not generalize. There has been some traditional organizations where they realize that this is a very important component. particularly if they are expanding globally, if they are increasing their footprint outside of India, that this is something that they definitely will have to work on. The whole piece about gravitas, communication, having that presence, grooming, communication, very, very critical. Within the organization, within the in India, if you look at very traditional organization, infrastructure, manufacturing, I think they're slowly coming around, and there is it also depends on what kind of leaders are leading these organizations. So, for example, if the leader himself or herself has been exposed to some of these things, then the acceptance is a lot better.
Sure. So, Bhaskar, I'm going to ask you a question where I want you to wear the hat of not a trainer or a coach or a business coach or a leadership coach, but going back to your days when you were actually heading organizations in the HR space also. And I'm going to ask you this question as a person from the HR fraternity. Is that okay with you?
Yeah, absolutely. Please go ahead.
Okay. So, it's always believed, and that is how traditional India believes. A lot of times I also say, no. Competence matters. But from an HR perspective, when two people are at the same competence level somewhere, how important, and I want you to answer from an HR, how important are people's opinions, your seniors' opinions, and the HR's view about you when you want to give them a bigger role? And I'm not talking only a career, a ladder movement, but even a bigger, meatier role in the organization. How important is it for people to have that within them is what I want.
I think it's a very, very critical component, because it doesn't take long for perceptions to become reality. And the buzz around you, the conversations that happen when you're not in the room, those are some of the things which shape perceptions. And definitely from an HR perspective, we have seen it happen so many times that even though you have the performance data showing very clearly that this person should deserve it, but it is the other things which have also influenced the choice of making that particular person move up or taking on a bigger role, meatier role, as you said it. So it's how you're getting discussed when you're not in the room is very critical.
That's what I call personal branding. So you think personal branding plays an important role in organizations?
Big way, big way.
Okay. So, Bhaskar, I have a question from Lata here, and I would like to ask. She's also working in HR in a large multinational organization. And a question she wants to ask is, what are some of the habits you think leaders must possess? And your views on that.
Yeah. So if I look at from the prism of executive presence and gravitas, because this question otherwise will be a very a long one to answer. But if I look at it from that perspective, then definitely having a point of view, that is very, very important. Your own point of view, your ability to craft stories, that is very, very important. Storytelling skills is very, very important. Your ability to be vulnerable, your ability to take feedback, all kinds of feedback. That is very, very important. And so I would say these three, along with your ability to communicate and connect, and influence outside your own domain, within the organization, outside the organization. These are critical skills and habits that one leader will have to constantly work on and make sure that they get better and better at it.
Okay, so she has another question. I'm going to ask that, then I will ask my last question. According to you, what are the key factors for performance differentiation? An HR person can only ask that question, Bhaskar.
So obviously the numbers are definitely there, that speak for themselves. But along with numbers, what has been achieved is very important, but how it has been achieved is equally important. And I would say that one of the key factors of performance differentiation should also include, in terms of if the organization has very strong values in place, how well the values were being adhered to while we were going for those numbers. I think that's a very critical component of the performance differentiation as well.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you, Bhaskar, for those two answers. I am sure, Bhaskar, and can I commit on your behalf that a lot of people are working in different geographies, and I'm getting messages constantly that they are at office right now. Some of the people from outside India or the eastern part of the world has slept right now. So there would be a lot of questions coming in. Can I commit on your behalf that we would be answering those questions on Facebook for them so that they do get answers for their questions? Can I do that on your behalf?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Happy to do that.
Okay. So, Bhaskar, one last question. You said, personal branding plays an important role. Okay. You said executive presence plays an important role. And all these are critical components, right? How can one today, as a person who's not exposed to this, do a couple of things? Okay, one, two, three, action point one, two, three that they can do, which can make them more visible in the eyes of the organization. So some action points or some takeaways quickly for them.
I think the first one, which I think you are a role model for, that is the one is the digital presence. I think
Okay.
that's very very important component, and
Okay.
having the consistency across different digital platforms. Okay,
Beautiful. Okay.
I think that's very very critical. That's very very important. I think it's also very very important to establish, if you are really in the business of training, coaching, consulting, to definitely establish yourself as a thought leader, to put out
Okay.
original stuff out there in terms of
Beautiful.
articles, in terms of videos, in terms of your point of view. What do you stand
Yeah.
for? Right?
True.
I think so. These two for me are very, very important. And of course, the third one is, if you're doing a good job, tell your clients that referrals are good, and there is no shame in asking for referrals in business, which, because 99% of the business happens through referrals, and there is no harm in asking for it.
Sure. So thank you so much, Bhaskar, for coming in and answering the questions, and also telling our viewers what exactly, from a coach's perspective, executive presence and gravitas is, and also from an HR perspective, how important it is in today's world to have the right executive presence, have the right personal branding. And what I like beautifully, and I think whatever I'm talking about, I think you've summed it up beautifully in your session, and this validates that I'm on the right track with thought leaders like you, validating that you need to be original, you need to have authenticity, and that's when you will build it up. And of course, so thank you so much. It was a pleasure having you with us today.
Thank you so much for this opportunity. Thanks a lot, Nandita.
Thank you. Bye-bye. Good night. And for
Goodbye.
all those of you who are listening in to us, if you have questions for Bhaskar, do send them in on our Facebook page. In case you want to ask a question which cannot be put on Facebook and you're looking at a transition, please DM the question to me. I will request Bhaskar to answer it for you. So good night and have a nice week ahead.
Thank you.
Thank you, Bhaskar.